Hello, I'm Logan Everett, 34 years old. I'm a civil engineer living in Boise, Idaho, a city that's not too noisy, just modern enough to feel the pulse of life, yet traditional enough to make you want to pause, take a deep breath, and reflect. My home is in the suburbs, a compact apartment just right for a single guy like me. I'm not one to ramble about my life, but since you've asked, I'll tell you my story. A story that begins with cracks in my family, with injustices that pushed me into a journey no one could have foreseen. I grew up in a family that, to outsiders, looked like the picture of perfect happiness. My father, Walter Everett, was a high school history teacher, now retired, living with rigid conservative beliefs. He had a way of making you feel like you were never quite good enough, as if you were always missing something to earn his approval. My mother, Martha, was the quintessential traditional mom, always bustling in the kitchen, tending to the whole world, except me. And then there was Cameron, my younger brother, 4 years my junior, the golden child of the family, treated like a precious gem from the moment he was born. And me. I was Logan, the strong older brother, the one my parents thought didn't need attention because he'll figure it out on his own. But being strong doesn't mean you don't feel pain. Some nights I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering why I was always pushed to the sidelines. When I was 10, Cameron got a shiny new bike just because he cried for it. Me? I had to tinker with Dad's rusty old bike to ride to school. When I graduated college with an engineering degree, my parents just patted me on the shoulder and said, "Good job, Logan, now go find a job." Meanwhile, Cameron, with his string of spectacularly failed restaurants, was still hailed as a business genius by our parents, even though everyone knew he was only good at spending money and pointing fingers. That injustice, it was like a small knife, cutting shallow but never healing. Every time I thought I'd gotten used to it, it bled a little more. But I kept going, kept working, kept trying to be the son my parents could be proud of, even though deep down I knew they'd never truly see me. Things started to unravel one October afternoon when my phone buzzed. It was Mom. Her voice trembled over the line, not from emotion, but as if she were holding back a storm of worry. "Logan, can you come home? We need to talk." I drove through the familiar streets of Boise, the maple trees blazing red under the autumn sun. A sense of unease clung to me like a bad premonition. The house I grew up in still stood, sturdy with its red brick, filled with memories, but it no longer felt like home. When I walked in, Mom was at the dining table, her hands twisting a dish towel as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. Dad sat across from her, his face set in that familiar stern expression, as if I were still the kid about to get scolded. "Logan," Mom began, her voice soft but heavy. "It's about Cameron." Of course it was. Always Cameron. "Your brother's in trouble," she continued. "The restaurants, they've all collapsed. He's in debt, big debt. I don't want to worry you, but this is serious." I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, waiting for the rest. I'd known for a while that Cameron's business ventures were shaky, but this was different. The way Mom avoided my eyes, the way Dad's jaw clenched, it wasn't just a failed business. It was a disaster. "How bad?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Dad spoke up, his tone curt. "Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Creditors are circling. He could lose everything." I should have felt sorry for my brother. He was family after all, but what I felt was a smoldering fire in my chest, fueled by years of being shoved aside to make room for Cameron. "So what do you want me to do?" I said, my voice sharper than intended. Mom flinched. "I'm not saying you have to fix it, Logan, but we've decided to help him. We're going to remortgage the house." Those words hit like a punch to the chest. The house, the one they'd spent their whole lives paying off, the one they swore they'd never risk. All to bail out Cameron, the golden child who'd squandered every opportunity he'd been given. "Are you kidding me?" I said, my voice low, dangerous. "You're going to gamble your entire future to pay off his debts? Again?" Dad's eyes narrowed. "He's your brother, Logan. Family helps family." "Family?" I shot back, the word bitter on my tongue. Where was family when I worked 2 jobs to pay for college? Where was family when I needed help just once? Mom reached out, her hand hovering as if she didn't know how to soothe me. Logan, you've always been strong. You didn't need us like Cameron does. That line, I'd heard it my whole life. Strong, independent, the son who didn't need coddling. I wanted to scream that I needed them too, that I'd just learned to stop asking. But I didn't. I swallowed the anger like always. The argument that followed wasn't pretty. I laid it all bare. Years of being overlooked, watching Cameron get bailed out while I had to swim on my own. Dad called me selfish, said I didn't understand family loyalty. Mom cried, begging me to understand, but this time, I couldn't. Not this time. I was about to leave, the cold doorknob under my palm, when Dad called out, "Wait, we're not abandoning you, Logan. There's something for you." I turned back, expecting another empty gesture. Mom handed me a folder, her hands trembling. "The cabin," she said. "The old cabin in Colorado where your grandfather lived. We're signing it over to you." The cabin, a crumbling wreck in the San Juan Mountains, abandoned since my grandfather Franklin disappeared in 1972. I almost laughed. They were tossing me a consolation prize, something no one wanted, while they bet their future on Cameron's mistakes. "Keep it," I said, but Mom pressed the folder into my hands. "It's yours, Logan. It's what we can give you." I walked out, the folder heavy in my hands, my heart heavier. I didn't need their pity, but something about the cabin, Grandpa Franklin's cabin, stuck with me. Maybe because he was always a mystery erased from the family story, or maybe because I had nowhere else to go. The drive home was a blur, Boise's streets fading in my anger and pain. I tossed the folder onto the kitchen table where it sat for days, daring me to open it. When I finally did, it was exactly what I expected. A deed, a faded photo of a dilapidated cabin nestled among pines, and a letter from Mom, her scrawled handwriting full of apologies I didn't want to read. But there was something else, a small leather-bound notebook, its pages yellowed and fragile. Grandpa Franklin's name was scrawled on the first page, along with the year 1972, the year he vanished. I flipped through it, skimming notes about rocks, minerals, and maps of the San Juan Mountains. His writing was meticulous, almost obsessive, as if he were chasing a secret he never shared with the family. I don't know why I kept reading. Maybe because Grandpa Franklin was the only person I felt a connection to, even if just through stories. He was a geologist, a quiet man who loved the mountains more than people. Mom once said I was like him, calm, solitary, stubborn. Maybe that's why I couldn't let go of the cabin. I took a week off work, packed a bag, and drove to Colorado. The San Juan Mountains were a far cry from Boise, wild, rugged, with peaks that seemed to tear at the sky. The cabin was deep in the mountains, a forgotten shadow untouched for decades. I didn't know what I was looking for, answers or just a place to breathe where no one expected me to be strong. When I arrived, the cabin was worse than I'd imagined. The roof sagged, the windows were shattered, and the air reeked of damp wood and regret. But stepping inside, something shifted. This wasn't just a ruin. This was Grandpa Franklin's place, and it held secrets, secrets that might give me a piece of the family I'd never been allowed to touch. I started cleaning, hauling out rotten planks and broken glass. Then I found it, a loose board in the wall, hiding a rusted iron ring. My heart pounded as I yanked it free, revealing a trapdoor I hadn't known existed. A cold, stale draft rose, heavy with the weight of forgotten years. The afternoon sun was fading outside the window, with only a few weak golden rays slipping through the gaps in the rotting wood, illuminating the dusty floor. I stood before the trapdoor, flashlight in hand, trembling, not from the cold, but from a strange feeling, as if I were about to touch something I shouldn't. My breath was heavy, mingling with the damp, earthy smell and the tang of rusted iron. I told myself it was just an old cellar, probably holding a few of Grandpa Franklin's discarded belongings. But deep down, A gut instinct told me that what waited below wasn't so simple. I flicked on the flashlight, its white beam cutting through the darkness like a blade. The wooden stairs leading down were decayed, creaking under each step as if they might collapse beneath me. I steadied myself with a hand on the cold dirt wall, moving cautiously, my heart hammering in my chest. When my feet hit the ground, I swept the light around the cellar. It was smaller than I'd expected, just a few square meters with rough dirt walls and air so thick it felt suffocating. But what froze me wasn't the size of the cellar. It was what lay on the floor. Two skeletons lying at an angle, their bones stark white under the flashlight's glare. One still had a hard hat toppled to the side. The other was draped in a tattered jacket, the fabric caked with dirt. My blood ran cold as if someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over me. I'm not a coward, but standing before two skeletons in a hidden cellar of an abandoned house, I couldn't stop myself from trembling. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, and knelt beside the bones. Nearby was an old dented tin box blotched with rust. I pried it open, the lid screeching dryly. Inside was a leather-bound notebook, a neatly folded map, and a small rock that glinted faintly gold under the light. My hands shook as I picked up the notebook, Grandpa Franklin's handwriting emerging tight and meticulous, as if written in a frenzy of obsession. I flipped through a few pages, finding notes on geology, minerals, and the San Juan Mountains. But one word kept appearing: gold. Not jewelry gold, but raw, unmined gold, locked in untouched veins. I sat back against the cellar wall, reading through the notebook. Grandpa wrote about a gold deposit hidden deep in the mountains, a discovery so big he believed it could transform the San Juan region. But he didn't want to mine it. He wanted to protect it from illegal prospectors. Toward the end, his tone grew frantic, as if racing against time. One final note sent a chill down my spine. Vincent betrayed me. Trust no one. Vincent. The name was unfamiliar, but it felt like a missing piece in Grandpa's story. I looked back at the skeletons, wondering if one was Grandpa Franklin, and the other? Was it Vincent? How had they died? A dispute? An accident? Or something worse? Questions swirled in my head, but there were no answers. Just darkness and the bone-chilling cold of the cellar. I don't know how long I stayed down there, maybe hours, reading and rereading the notebook, trying to piece together what Grandpa left behind. When I climbed back up, the sky was pitch black, with faint moonlight filtering through the broken windows. I set the tin box on the cabin's rickety kitchen table, my eyes fixed on the small gold-flecked rock. It wasn't large, just fist-sized, but its shimmering glow whispered of buried secrets. I knew I was holding something monumental, but also dangerous. If this gold deposit was real, it explained why Grandpa vanished, and why someone might have wanted him gone. I fell asleep in an old armchair, clutching the notebook. The next morning, I woke with a stiff neck and a reeling mind. I needed answers, but first I needed to know who those skeletons were. I called the local police in Durango, the nearest town, and reported my discovery. My voice was calm, but inside I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. The police arrived at noon, led by a middle-aged officer named Hank, who seemed familiar with the strange tales of these mountains. I led them to the cellar, trying to keep my voice steady as I pointed to the skeletons. Hank studied me, his gaze probing. "You say this was your grandfather's place?" "Yeah," I replied. "Franklin Everett. He disappeared in 1972, I think. One of them is him." Hank nodded, ordering his team to take photos and collect evidence. "We'll run DNA tests," he said. "But brace yourself. This could get complicated." I didn't know what he meant, but the way he looked at the cellar unnerved me, as if he knew something I didn't. Over the next few days, I stayed at the cabin, patching it up enough to make it a decent place to sleep. Each night, I pored over Grandpa's notebook, trying to piece together the story. He'd worked with a friend, Vincent Hale, another geologist. They'd discovered the gold deposit together, but then things fell apart. The notebook didn't say what Vincent did, only angry lines about betrayal. I started imagining all sorts of scenarios: a fight, a scuffle, or worse, a plot. But I had no proof, just a gut feeling that the gold was at the heart of it all. The police called back after a week. Hank met me at a small coffee shop in Durango, handing me a thin file. "DNA confirmed it," he said, his voice low. "One skeleton is Franklin Everett, your grandfather. The other is Vincent Hale, his colleague." I nodded, having suspected as much, but it still felt like a punch to the chest. "How did they die?" Hank shrugged. "Hard to say. There's evidence of a struggle. Vincent's skull is cracked, but the cause isn't clear. Could be an accident or..." He paused, looking at me. "Do you want us to keep digging?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted the truth, but another part feared it would unearth secrets my family wasn't ready to face. "Keep going," I said finally. "I need to know." Back at the cabin, I turned to the map from the tin box. It was hand-drawn, eerily detailed, marking a spot deep in the San Juan Mountains near a dry creek. I'm no geologist, but I know enough about terrain to realize this wasn't a casual hike. I packed gear. Hiking boots, a flashlight, a knife, and an old hunting rifle I found in the cabin, then set out. The trek took all day through rugged trails, sheer cliffs, and dense pine forests. The sun dipped behind the peaks, leaving a biting chill in the air. When I reached the spot, it was a small clearing hidden by massive boulders. I knelt down, scraping away the surface dirt, and found what I was looking for, a vein of rock glinting with gold in the fading light. My heart pounded. Grandpa was right. The gold deposit was real. I sat back on the ground, the rock trembling in my hand under the twilight glow. Its golden shimmer felt like a promise, but also a warning. I'm not a dreamer, but in that moment I saw a future, not for the money, but because this was Grandpa's legacy. Something he'd given his life to protect. I thought of the final lines in his notebook, about Vincent Hale's betrayal, about the secrets buried in these San Juan Mountains. I knew I was holding something monumental but far more dangerous than I'd imagined. That night, I returned to the cabin, my mind spinning with plans. If this gold deposit was real, I needed to do everything by the book, legally, transparently, to ensure no one could steal it. I'm no geologist like Grandpa, but I'm an engineer. I know how to plan. I pored over the notebook, studying every line, every hand-drawn map. Grandpa had marked the exact location of the vein, along with notes on the geological structure. I cross-checked the map on my laptop with public geological data for the San Juan region. Everything lined up perfectly. This wasn't a small-time find. It could be one of the biggest discoveries in the area in decades. The next morning, I drove to Durango to the Colorado Division of Reclamation, Mining, and Safety. I brought the rock sample, the map, and a copy of Grandpa's notebook, carefully leaving the original locked in the tin box at the cabin. The official, a middle-aged woman named Ellen, looked at me with a mix of curiosity and skepticism as I laid out the story. "You're saying your grandfather found this deposit in the 70s?" she asked, pushing up her glasses. "Yes," I replied, placing the rock on her desk. "I found evidence in his cabin. I want to file for legal mining rights." Ellen picked up the rock, examining it under her desk lamp. "This is high-grade gold ore," she said cautiously. "But you'll need further surveys, samples, and a formal application. The process isn't quick, and the San Juans, they attract a lot of attention." I nodded, knowing she meant the big mining companies always sniffing around for opportunities. "I understand, but I want to do this the right way." She gave a faint smile, handing the rock back. "Good. I'll send a survey team to verify. If it's what you say, this could be big. But be careful, Logan. Gold always brings trouble." Her warning echoed in my mind as I left the office. I knew I was stepping into a dangerous game, but there was no turning back. This wasn't just about money. It was about finishing what Grandpa started, about proving I was more than the strong older brother my family always overlooked. The process for securing mining rights took nearly a month. I hired an independent survey team to confirm the vein, and the results exceeded expectations. The deposit was deep in the mountains, but its estimated value reached hundreds of millions of dollars if mined properly. The state finally granted me temporary mining rights on the condition that I partner with an experienced company to ensure safety and environmental compliance. I chose a small Denver-based firm, Rocky Mountain Resources, known for transparency and not tied to the greedy giants like Hale Minerals LLC, the company owned by Travis Hale, who showed up at my door with a cold stare. I'll never forget the day Travis came. He stood there tall in a black suit, flanked by two men who looked ready to break me if I said the wrong thing. "You're digging up something that doesn't belong to you, Logan," he said, his voice smooth but sharp as a blade. "My grandfather, Vincent, and your grandfather worked together. If there's gold, half of it belongs to the Hales." I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. "My grandfather wrote that Vincent betrayed him. If there's gold, it's my family's, not yours." Travis laughed, a chilling sound that made my skin crawl. "Be careful, Everett. Don't let the past drag you down to the cellar with them." He left, leaving me with a gnawing unease. I knew he wasn't bluffing. Hale Minerals was a major player in the San Juans with enough money and connections to make my life hell. But I wasn't backing down. Not this time. I began the mining project, hiring a skilled crew and equipment from Rocky Mountain Resources. We set up camp near the deposit a few miles from the cabin. Every day I was at the site, overseeing exploratory drilling and sampling. The vein became clearer, its gold-flecked rocks thrilling the crew. But I couldn't share their excitement. Every night I lay in my tent listening to the wind howl through the mountains, feeling like someone was watching. Trouble started in the third week. One morning I arrived at the site to find the main drill rig sabotaged, cables cut, engine clogged with sand. The workers whispered among themselves, eyes nervous. "Someone doesn't want us here," one said, voice shaky. I scoured the area, finding unfamiliar footprints around the equipment and scattered beer cans. I reported it to the police, but Hank, the officer from Durango, just shrugged. "The San Juans are full of vandals. Could be drunks or poachers. Not enough evidence to investigate." I knew it wasn't drunks. This was Travis Hale. He wanted me to quit, to abandon the deposit. But I'm not the type to give up. I hired extra security, installed cameras around the site, and had the crew work in shifts to ensure no one could sneak in at night. But Travis didn't stop. A week later, a group of workers refused to show up, saying they'd been threatened over the phone. "They said if we don't quit, our families will be in trouble," one told me, his face pale. I raised their pay, hired armed guards, but the mood at the site had changed. Everyone worked on edge, always glancing over their shoulders as if the darkness might swallow them. The breaking point came on a stormy night. I was at the cabin reviewing the map when I heard a strange noise outside. A metallic clang, then heavy footsteps. I grabbed the hunting rifle, heart pounding, and cracked the door to look out. In the faint moonlight, I saw 3 men near my truck. One held a crowbar, smashing the tires. I shouted, raising the rifle, "Stop! Get out of here now!" They turned but didn't run. The leader, I recognized him as one of the men with Travis, smirked. "You should know better, Everett. Walk away from the deposit, or it's not just your truck that'll get wrecked." I fired a shot into the air, the sound echoing through the mountains. They bolted, vanishing into the forest. But when I checked the truck, all 4 tires were slashed, and scrawled in red paint on the windshield was, "Leave." I called Hank, but this time I didn't expect much from the police. I knew Travis was playing dirty, and he had enough money to buy off anyone. I needed a new plan, a way to protect the deposit and myself. The next morning I drove to Denver, bringing the notebook and copies of the key documents. I had an appointment with Jake Sullivan, a renowned lawyer specializing in mining disputes. Jake had a sharp gaze, as if he could see through everything, but his warm, approachable voice made me feel I wasn't alone. I told him everything, from the skeletons in the cellar to the gold deposit and Travis Hale's sabotage. I slid the notebook across to him, pointing to the entry about Vincent. "This is what I have," I said. "Travis is trying to stop me from mining the deposit. I think he's scared I'll uncover the truth about his family." Jake flipped through the notebook, skimming my grandfather's words, then leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers lightly on the desk. "Logan, you're sitting on a powder keg," he said, his voice low. "This deposit is real and it's worth hundreds of millions. But do you see it? You're not just up against Travis, you're up against a whole system. Hale Minerals has money, connections, and they won't stop." "So what do I do?" I asked, a wave of unease rising. "Keep mining and wait for them to sabotage me again?" Jake smiled, but it was the kind of smile from someone who'd seen too many dirty tricks in this industry. "There's a simpler way, Logan. Sell the mining rights. Find a big, reputable corporation and sell it to them. You'll get a fortune, without the headache of dealing with Travis or his goons. They won't dare touch an international conglomerate." I froze. Sell the deposit? The thought hadn't crossed my mind. This gold was my grandfather's legacy, something he'd given his life to protect. Selling it felt like abandoning his dream. But then I thought of the sleepless nights, the strange noises outside, the threats that drove my workers away. I didn't want to live in fear forever. And maybe, just maybe, Grandpa wouldn't want me to die for this deposit like he had. "You don't have to decide now," Jake said, as if reading my mind, "but think it over. If you keep the deposit, you'll have to fight Travis to the end, and he doesn't play fair. If you sell, you can walk away from this mess with enough money to change your life. And who knows? Maybe you can use that money to do something meaningful, something your grandfather would have wanted." I returned to the cabin, Jake's words echoing in my head. Sell the deposit. The idea was both tempting and painful. I opened Grandpa's notebook, rereading some of his notes. One line stood out. "Gold isn't everything. It's a curse in the hands of the greedy." Maybe he was right. He didn't want this deposit mined by people like Vincent Hale or Travis, but he also wouldn't want me to pay the price he did. I spent the night thinking, weighing every option. If I kept mining, I'd face Travis, more sabotage, and possibly worse dangers. But if I sold, I could end it all, not just the trouble, but the years of being overlooked by my family. I could prove I didn't need their approval, that I could build my own life. The next morning, I called Jake. "I'm in," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Find a reputable company. I want to sell." Jake wasn't surprised. "Good, I know the right company, Gold Rock Corp. They're an international mining conglomerate based in Canada looking to expand in the US. I'll arrange a meeting. But Logan, brace yourself. This will be a big deal." Things moved faster than I expected. Jake contacted Gold Rock, and within a week they sent a team of experts to the San Juans to survey the deposit. I led them to the vein, where the gold-flecked rock still lay buried under the earth. Gold Rock's team worked with precision, taking samples, measuring and checking everything with a thoroughness that reassured me. They confirmed what I already knew. The deposit was a treasure with enough reserves to mine for years. Meanwhile, Travis didn't sit idle. He caught wind of Gold Rock, probably through his connections in Durango. One afternoon, while I was at the site, his familiar black truck pulled up. He stepped out, still in his sleek black suit, but this time his eyes burned with anger, not just cold calculation. "You think selling the deposit will get you out of this, Everett?" he growled. "The Hales have a claim to that gold. My grandfather died for it." I stood tall, meeting his gaze. "Your grandfather betrayed mine, Travis. If you want a claim, sue me. But I'm warning you, I have proof, my grandfather's notebook. It tells the whole story." Travis clenched his fists, but he didn't make a move. Maybe he knew Gold Rock wasn't someone he could push around. He glared at me for a moment, then turned away, tossing back a final threat. "You'll regret this." But I didn't regret it, not this time. The negotiations with Gold Rock took place in a Denver office. I sat across from their CEO, an older man named Richard with silver hair and a calm, steady voice. He slid a thick contract across the table. "We value your deposit at $45 million, he said. "You'll receive the full amount plus a 5% stake in the mining project. If the deposit performs well, your shares could grow significantly in value. I picked up the pen, my hand trembling slightly. $45 million. A number I'd never dared to dream of. But it wasn't the money that moved me. It was the thought that I'd finished what Grandpa started. I signed my name, the ink steady, and when I stood to shake Richard's hand, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I'd escaped Travis, the sleepless nights, and most importantly, the shadow of my family. After the contract was signed, Travis vanished from the radar. He probably knew he had no chance against Gold Rock. The site was no longer sabotaged, and Gold Rock's team began large-scale mining operations. I returned to Boise carrying a fortune and a sense of freedom I'd never known. But deep down, I could still hear Grandpa's whisper through the pages of his notebook. I knew I hadn't just sold the deposit. I'd sold a piece of the past to secure my future. I returned to Boise with $45 million from Gold Rock and a 5% stake in the mining project. The number was so staggering that sometimes I had to pinch myself to make sure I wasn't dreaming. My small suburban apartment now felt cramped, not for lack of space, but because it no longer fit the person I was becoming. I started thinking about buying a new house, maybe one overlooking the Boise River where I could sit quietly, listen to the water flow, and think about Grandpa Franklin, the man who'd given me this opportunity, even if he wasn't here to see it. But news, like gold, has a way of spreading. Within weeks of signing the contract with Gold Rock, local newspapers started running stories. Boise engineer uncovers $1 million gold deposit in San Juan, a headline in the Idaho Statesman read. The article told my story, or rather a glamorized version of it, about how I'd found my grandfather's legacy and turned it into a massive deal. They called me a local hero, but I just felt like a tired engineer trying to do right by what Grandpa left behind. I didn't expect the news to spread so fast. It didn't stop at Boise. Social media began buzzing, from local groups to mining forums. One morning, as I sipped coffee and checked my emails, my phone buzzed incessantly with congratulatory messages from old friends, colleagues, even strangers. But one message stopped me cold. It was from my mother. "Logan, we heard about the gold deposit. Can you come home to talk? We're proud of you." I stared at the screen, my coffee going cold in my hand. Proud? Since when did my parents know that word when it came to me? An old feeling like an unhealed wound stirred in my chest. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I set the phone down, stood up, and walked to the balcony. The Boise breeze swept through, carrying the scent of dry grass and memories of days when I was pushed to the sidelines while Cameron, my younger brother, remained the center of attention. 3 days later, I drove to the old house in suburban Boise where I grew up. The red brick house still stood solid as memory, but now coated with the dust of time. I didn't want to come, didn't want to face them, but a part of me was curious. Curious to hear what they'd say after everything that had happened. Mom opened the door, her smile trembling as if she wasn't sure whether I'd turn and walk away. "Logan," she said softly, "come in. We're waiting." Dad sat in his familiar armchair, a folded newspaper on his lap, but his eyes lacked their usual sharpness. Instead, he looked at me with a caution I'd never seen before. And then I saw Cameron standing in the corner, hands in his pockets, avoiding my gaze. He looked worse than the last time I saw him. Disheveled hair, a cheap, wrinkled suit. His string of failed restaurants had clearly left its mark. "Sit down, Logan," Mom said, gesturing to the sofa. I sat, but I didn't relax. I knew they hadn't called me here just for tea and old stories. Dad spoke first, his voice slow, as if weighing every word. "We heard about the gold deposit, $45 million. That's a lot of money, Logan. You've done something big." I nodded, saying nothing, waiting. I knew they weren't stopping there. Mom picked up, her voice soft but laced with intent. "You know our family has been through a lot, especially Cameron, your brother. He's still trying to get back on his feet after the restaurant fiasco. We thought, maybe you could help." I felt a rush of heat to my head, but I kept my voice steady. "Help? What do you mean?" Cameron finally looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Logan, I know you're mad at me, but I'm trying to start over. A small loan from your money, it would mean a lot." I laughed, not out of amusement, but at his audacity. "A small loan? Cameron, you bankrupted an entire chain of restaurants. Mom and Dad mortgaged the house to bail you out. Now you want what? A piece of the gold deposit I nearly died protecting?" Mom reached out as if to soothe me. "Logan, don't be like that. We're family. You've done something incredible, and we just want to share in that joy." "Share?" I stood, unable to hold back anymore. "Have you ever shared anything with me? When I worked 2 jobs to pay for college? When I needed one word of encouragement just once? All I got was Logan's strong, Logan will figure it out. Now I have something of my own and you want me to share?" Dad slammed his hand on the table, his voice sharp. "That's enough, Logan. You can't be this selfish. You need to remember your grandfather's cabin was family property. What you found there, you owe to your brother too." I looked at Dad, then Mom, then Cameron. They sat there waiting, as if I owed them this. But this time I wasn't the obedient older brother anymore. "I'm not sharing with anyone," I said, my voice low but firm. "This gold deposit belongs to Grandpa Franklin, not the family, and I've sold it, to protect it from people like Travis Hale. If you want money, ask Cameron how much of the family's money he's already burned through." Cameron lunged forward, his face red. "You don't get to talk like that. You think you're better than me just because you found some gold?" I looked him in the eye. "No, Cameron, I'm not better than you. I'm just tired of carrying your mistakes." Mom started crying, but this time I didn't soften. I turned and walked out, leaving them in heavy silence. As I got in my car, I saw Dad standing at the door watching me, but he didn't call me back. I drove away from the red brick house, my heart heavy but strangely light at the same time. For the first time in my life, I felt unburdened by my family's expectations, no longer forced to be the strong, older brother. The $45 million from Gold Rock and the 5% stake in the mining project had given me something I'd never had. Freedom. Freedom to live for myself, to shape my life the way I wanted, not the way my parents or Cameron expected. Back in Boise, I began rebuilding my life. The first thing I did was move out of the cramped suburban apartment. I found a new home, a spacious riverside villa along the Boise River with large windows overlooking the shimmering water and the misty hills in the distance. The house had a wide backyard where I planted a few maple trees to remind me of Boise's autumn days when life felt simpler. Every morning I stood on the balcony sipping coffee, breathing in the cool air and telling myself this was a fresh start. Next came the car. I'd driven the old truck for too long with its worn seats and lingering smell of engine oil. I went to a dealership and picked out a sleek black SUV, the kind I'd once thought was only for the wealthy people in movies. Sitting in the driver's seat, the cool leather under my hands, I smiled. Not because I needed to show off, but because for the first time I allowed myself to enjoy something. I also quit my job at the construction company. My boss, Mr. Harris, looked at me as if I'd just announced I was flying to Mars. "Logan, are you sure?" he asked, eyebrows raised. "You're the best engineer we've got." "Absolutely," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "I've done enough. It's time to live." With the money from Gold Rock and the mining stake, I didn't need to work another day in my life. I could live comfortably forever and then some. I started shopping, not extravagantly, but for things I'd always dreamed of but never dared touch. A real leather sofa for the living room, a big screen TV for weekend football games. I booked a trip. My first time leaving the US, I went to Italy, wandering the cobblestone streets of Florence, sitting in tiny cafes in Rome and watching the sunset over the Amalfi Coast. There no one knew me as Logan Everett, the gold deposit guy, or the son overlooked by his family. I was just a 34-year-old man enjoying the life he deserved. But no matter where I went, what I bought or what I did, I felt a void. It wasn't clear at first, just a vague sensation like forgetting something important but not being able to name it. I thought it was just exhaustion from the stressful months in the San Juans, or maybe I wasn't used to having so much free time. I tried to fill the void with trips and new things, but it lingered, smoldering like an old wound. 2 years passed in a blur. My 5% stake in the mining project started paying off. Every month, a hefty sum flowed into my account, more than I could spend. Goldrock managed the deposit efficiently, and the value of my shares soared well past $100 million. I was no longer the engineer in a small apartment. I was a multi-millionaire, the Boise gold hero the local press still occasionally mentioned. But the title didn't make me happy. It only made me feel more disconnected from myself. My family hadn't reached out since our last confrontation. No texts from Mom, no calls from Dad, no accusations from Cameron. Their silence should have been a relief, but it only deepened the void inside me. I began to realize that despite the hurt they'd caused, despite their favoritism toward Cameron, they were still family. The only people who'd seen me grow up, who knew who I was before the gold changed everything. One evening, I sat in my new living room in front of the big screen TV watching The Hobbit. The scene where Smaug the dragon lay atop his massive hoard of gold, his eyes glinting with greed, stopped me cold. Smaug was rich, powerful, but utterly alone, imprisoned by his own treasure. The image hit me like a punch to the chest. I looked around my house, beautiful, luxurious, but empty. No laughter, no family dinners, no one to share it with. I realized I was becoming what Grandpa Franklin had warned about in his notebook. Someone corrupted by gold, living in wealth but starved for connection, for meaning. I turned off the TV, stood up, and walked to the balcony. The Boise River shimmered under the moonlight, but this time, it brought no peace. I thought of Grandpa, how he'd chosen to protect the gold deposit rather than mine it. He didn't want gold to ruin him or others, but what about me? I'd sold the deposit, used the money to build a new life, but what was I losing? A flawed family, a part of myself? I decided I had to change, not just for me, but for Grandpa, for what he'd taught me through his notebook. I didn't want to be Smaug, guarding a treasure in solitude. I wanted a life that meant something, a life Grandpa would be proud of. The first step was reaching out to my family. I picked up my phone, my fingers hesitating over the screen. I called Mom. The phone rang 3 times before she answered, her voice trembling as if she couldn't believe it was me. "Logan?" she said, almost a whisper. "Mom," I replied, my voice just as unsteady. "I want to talk." The conversation wasn't easy. I didn't apologize for what I'd said at our last meeting, but I told her I wanted to mend things. Mom cried and Dad spoke, his voice softer than I remembered. They told me Cameron was trying to start over, working at a small coffee shop to pay off his debts. I didn't promise to give them money outright, but I said I'd help. Not because I owed them, but because I wanted to. I began supporting my family, but on my terms. I sent Cameron money to clear his debts, but only if he enrolled in a financial management course. I also paid off the remaining mortgage on my parents' house, so they wouldn't have to worry about their future. They thanked me. But I knew money alone couldn't heal the cracks in our family. That would take time, and I was willing to wait. Then I started planning something bigger, a true legacy, not just for my family, but for the community. I established the Franklin Everett Foundation, focused on geological education and environmental protection in the San Juan region. I wanted future generations to understand that gold wasn't just money, it was a responsibility. I also funded a community center in Durango where kids could learn about science, the mountains, and people like my grandfather who sacrificed for what they believed in. In the fall of 2024, I stood in front of the Franklin Everett Community Center in Durango, watching people stream in and out. Children ran around the courtyard laughing as they played near miniature rock formations, while teachers guided them on how to identify minerals. I overheard a little girl ask her teacher, "Who was Franklin?" The teacher smiled, pointing to the plaque bearing my grandfather's name at the entrance. He was a man who found a treasure but chose to protect it instead of keeping it for himself. I stood there, hands in my pockets, feeling a quiet pride, not for the money or the fame, but because I'd turned Grandpa's dream into reality. His notebook, once a secret buried in a cold cellar, was now a beacon for future generations. I think he'd smile if he saw this, the quiet smile Mom used to talk about, the smile of a man who knew he'd done right. But Grandpa's legacy wasn't just in Durango, it was in me, in how I learned to live again, to forgive, and to love once more. My life, since signing the contract with Gold Rock, had changed in ways I never could have imagined. And now, it was brighter than ever. Reconciling with my family wasn't easy. After that phone call with Mom, I started visiting the red brick house in Boise more often. At first, the visits were awkward, filled with uneasy silences. Mom tried to make up for it by cooking my childhood favorites, mashed potato casserole with beef gravy, the dish she'd make for my birthdays without ever asking if I wanted it. Dad was quieter, but I noticed him starting to ask about my work, about the Durango Center, with a curiosity I'd never seen before. Cameron was the biggest challenge. He still carried a trace of his old arrogance, but I could see he was trying to change. After the financial management course I'd required, he opened a small coffee shop in downtown Boise. Not as grand as his old restaurant chain, but enough for him to stand on his own. One day, when I stopped by, he poured me a coffee and hesitantly said, "Logan, thanks for not giving up on me." I just nodded, taking a sip. "Keep doing well, Cameron, that's how you thank me." Slowly, family dinners at my parents' house became a vital part of my life. They weren't loud or lively, but they were warm in the way I'd craved as a kid. One evening, as we ate Mom's roasted chicken, Dad suddenly set down his fork and looked at me. "Logan," he said, his voice rough, "I'm sorry we didn't see what you accomplished. We were wrong to think you were always fine. You've made us proud." I swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. Mom squeezed my hand under the table, her eyes glistening. "You're our greatest gift," she said. I smiled, not the polite smile I'd used to mask my feelings, but a real one. "Thanks," I said, and for the first time in years I felt I truly belonged here. My life now is vibrant. I'm no longer the engineer in a cramped apartment, working himself to exhaustion to prove his worth. I travel more, not just to indulge, but to find inspiration. I went to Alaska, marveling at glaciers shimmering under the sun, and to South Africa, where I joined an environmental conservation project. Each trip taught me something new, about the world, about people, and about myself. In Boise, I got involved in community activities, from funding local schools to hosting geology workshops for kids. The Franklin Everett Center in Durango became a model, and I started planning to expand it to other cities like Boise and Denver. I wanted kids everywhere to know that science isn't just textbooks. It's stories of sacrifice, courage, and responsibility to the earth. The money from my mining stake still flows steadily into my account, but I'm no longer obsessed with it. I've learned that gold, no matter how precious, can't fill a void in your soul. What makes me happy are the small moments, a family dinner, the laughter of kids at the community center, or a quiet morning by the Boise River as I write these words. If you ask me what I've learned through all this, I'd say life is a journey to find meaning, not treasure. I once thought the gold deposit was the answer to all my problems, but it was just a tool. What matters is how you use it, to build, to heal, or to destroy. My advice, if you're reading this, is to listen to your heart. Don't let money or ambition blind you. Cherish the people around you, even if they're imperfect. My family hurt me, but I learned to forgive. Not because they deserved it, but because I wanted to live without the weight of resentment. Find a purpose bigger than yourself. For me, that's the Franklin Everett Center, the kids who'll grow up dreaming of changing the world like my grandfather did. And finally, remember, you don't have to be strong all the time. Sometimes admitting you need others is the greatest strength of all. I stand on the balcony of my riverside home in Boise, watching the sun set, its golden light stretching across the water. Grandpa's whisper is no longer a warning. It's a blessing, reminding me I've found my path. A path filled with color, meaning, and above all, love.